Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2022 Wisconsin elections, which is the Senate race, the governor's race, and an important House race that I think will be worth watching. So, as you might have noticed, 2 videos ago, and if you haven't noticed or haven't watched that video, please do pause the video, go watch that, because I think it's important for this video too. I talked about why I think Michigan could be a mini blue sweep, or a blue wave, if you will, within the state. I think Democrats are going to win 3 of the 4 competitive congressional districts. I think Democrats are going to hold the governorship. I think they're going to do very well up and down the ballot with referendums and state legislative seats in Michigan. I think Wisconsin could be the inverse of that, and it's ironic because Wisconsin is Michigan's next door neighbor, but I think Wisconsin will be a bit of a red wave, within the state. I expect the Republican Party to win the Senate race. I expect the Republican Party to do very well in the governor's race. And I think they're going to pick off a House seat that I'll talk about at the end of the video here as well. But Wisconsin, I think, will be a really good state for Republicans in 2020, in November, I should say, because we're in 2022. And it's pretty easy to see why once you get into the data. So let's talk about this. We're going to start with the Senate race here. Again, this is a race between incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson and Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, who again hasn't, he's a statewide official, but he hasn't won statewide. So just wanted to get rid of that assumption right off the bat here. He only won, he's only in the position he's in because Tony Evers won the governor's race in 2018. So he is a statewide official, but he has not won statewide on his own, I should say. Now, right now, Ron Johnson has a 1-point lead. And, that might seem, okay, well, he's up by 1, so I guess a bit of an advantage, but doesn't mean too much, right? Well, Wisconsin polls have been really weird, and they tend to miss the same way in every election. What happens with polls in Wisconsin, the thing that seems to be polls' downfall in Wisconsin is that they tend to overestimate Democratic support with white voters and underestimate Republican support with turnout and, general just support with working class voters. And if you look at the 2016 polls in Wisconsin, they did not show really anything that would have indicated Trump winning it. Trump won Wisconsin by about a point in 2016. He was down in the polls by 6% on election day. So that's a 7% miss on its own. And in the 2020 election, Biden was up by 8.4% on election day in Wisconsin. And yes, he did win it, but he only won by 0.6. It was within a point. It was very close. And, the polls overshot Biden by nearly 8%. So, the fact that Trump he beat his polls by 8% is pretty impressive. And the fact that Johnson's already up by a point right now, he's outperforming Trump in the polls by 9.5 is really impressive, considering the fact that Trump came so close to winning, and Ron Johnson's out here up by a point in the average right now, which is very good for him. Now, let's talk with Ron Johnson again, because in 2016 he won his re-election bid. This is his second re-election bid. He won first in 2010, then won in 2016. Now for 2022, the drill. And the thing that's so striking about this 2016 Senate race in Wisconsin is that look at the polls. All but one poll had Ron Johnson losing. The only poll that had him up was this random Loris poll. I've never actually heard of it. He's only up by 5. Every other poll, I'm not going to read them all out to you, but look, every other poll had Russ Feingold winning. Every other poll had him ahead. He was supposed to win this race fairly easily. Again, this was viewed as a lean to likely Democratic pickup. Ron Johnson was considered to be kind of in a bit of a sticky spot, not necessarily dead on arrival the way, Cory Gardner or Doug Jones was, but, he was in a position in which he had to do a lot of things to win his Senate race. And the consensus on election day 2016 was that he was going to go down. And it's easy to see why, in retrospect, why he won. But like at the time, he was down in almost every poll. The average had him down by 3%. And, that was outside the margin of error that we would consider to be realistic at the time. So, and again, by the way, I want to reiterate that at this point in 2016, September 30th, he was down by 10. And, he had closed the gap by election day, but he was down by 10 at that point in 2016. So, that's just pretty striking to me. But like, he led it all. He was losing in all but one poll, down by 3% on election day. He still managed to win re-election in 2016 over Russ Feingold by a fairly, it wasn't even a squeaker. It was actually a pretty solid performance. He outran Trump by about 2%, and he won by 3.4%, which again is the best margin of victory for a Republican in Wisconsin, I think, since 2014. So Ron Johnson did very well in 2016. He outperformed his polls by 6.1%. Just really, really good performance. So If you apply the 2020 swing to the Ron Johnson polls, he'd win by 9. If you apply the 2016 presidential swing, he'd win by 8. And if you apply the 2016 Senate swing, he'd win by 7. Either way, pick which swing you want to apply. I don't really care because it gets you the same result, which is a Ron Johnson victory. Now, I personally think the polls won't miss by as much this time. I don't think Ron Johnson's going to by like 9%. But like, here's the thing. Ron Johnson's been underestimated by polls in 2016. They're like, if he's up by 1, he's going to win. Unless Mandela Barnes like retakes the lead in like a substantial manner, I don't think he's going to, be able to pull this off. He still has like a chance, but like really, to me, Ron John's a really clear favorite at this point. And like anyone who still thinks Mandela Barnes is going to win, I think is just being misled or like, spinning that data. And so, Ron Johnson's going to win this race. It will not, I think, even be that close. I think he'll win by more than he did in 2016. I think he'll win by about 4%. And it's going to be another good performance in the Senate for Republicans in Wisconsin. So that's the Senate race. Call that a lean Republican race, although closer to likely than toss-up. So let's talk now about this governor's race here. I'm going to close that tab because RSB makes my computer want to explode. Let's start with the governor's race here. So Tony Evers is up by 1.5 over Tim Michels, I guess I should say. I don't know if it's Michels or Michaels because, it looks like it's Michels, but I guess I'll say Michaels. So Tim Michels is down by 1.5% to Tony Evers, the incumbent Democrat here. Again, Tony Evers won in 2018. Talk about that in a second too. But, Michaels is down by 1.5. And again, we talked about the 2016 Senate swing. But let's talk about the 2020 swing because I think it's most important for a governor's race here compared to a, Senate race from a few years ago. Right now, in 2020, Biden led by 8.4%. And by the way, just for those curious, at this time in 2020, he led by 7. So it wasn't like he surged on election day. He'd only gained about 1.5 between that and election day. But apply that swing is still a 6% miss in Wisconsin anyways, just to point that out. But anyways, on election day, Biden was up by 8.4. He won the state by 0.6. That is a 7.8% swing towards Donald Trump. If you apply that swing to Tony Evers' lead, he would lose by like 6%. It would not even really be that close. So that is really bad for Tony Evers. I think, to be sitting pretty as a Democrat in Wisconsin, you have to be up by like at least 5 or 6% in the polls. And even then, you could still see a big enough miss to make the race a toss-up. And Evers is only up by 1.5 right now. And, he hasn't really cracked 50% in any polls since we got that Marquette from, back in, I think, June and August. We saw one poll. Nope, not even then. He was still at 40. Yeah, interesting. So, the only poll we saw him at, really doing well in recently was this poll that came out of Marquette back in August, had him up by 4. He'll, I think that's his best poll, really, and he's only up by 4. Like even his best poll, he's still not beating Biden's margin. He's still not even getting close to Hillary Clinton's margin either. So, really not a good sign for Tony Evers. And again, in these polls, he doesn't really have good approval. He's not really someone who I think is particularly well liked in Wisconsin. Again, he's not super unpopular. Like he's not Sam Brownback or Tom Corbett. But he's someone who I think is just not really as big of a brand in Wisconsin to like win re-election in a more Republican-leaning environment like this. And in 2018, if you look at the 2018 Wisconsin elections, it's interesting to see here because again, you can say the Senate race, the Republicans gave up on their candidate. They didn't, this race is not really viewed as competitive, and that would be true. But like this was a Baldwin won by 11 points. Okay, right, like very impressive showing for her, no doubt. But in the governor's race, as you can see right here, Tony Evers only won by a point over Scott Walker. And, Scott Walker was an incumbent. You can say it's always hard to beat out an incumbent. And, I think that's partially true. But, like, Scott Walker was he wasn't a bipartisan establishment figure in Wisconsin. He was a polarizing governor who dealt with a lot of political backlash in his time in office. And, he had a lot of people really liked him. A lot of people really did not like him. And, he did very well in the suburbs. He was able to win Waukesha by a lot more than Trump did. But he got hammered with working class voters because he was, a very anti-union governor. He didn't really get along well with the working class, and that's what cost him in 2018. And so Evers was able to beat out Walker by doing really well in the working class areas. But these areas were trending away from Democrats. And Biden, there were a lot of Evers voters in 2018 that voted for Trump and will probably be voting for Michaels in 2020 because, again, he's a much better candidate for the working class than Evers. And so when you have all that, being factored in, does not look, did I say Evers? I meant he's better candidate for the working class than Walker. Factor all that in. Like I don't think Evers will do well enough in the WOW counties. I think he's going to do a lot more, a lot worse than he did in 2018 in these working class areas. And that's going to give you a fairly solid Tim Michels victory. He'd probably win by 2 or 3% in that map. Again, I haven't mapped it out just yet. I'll do that on election week. Part of my big project on election week is going to be mapping out all these elections for you guys to see my predictions, and you can come back on election night and tell me how wrong I was and whatnot. But like, Evers, I just don't think he's going to win. Doesn't really have good approval ratings. He only won by 1% in a D plus 8.6 year, with Baldwin winning at the top of the ticket by 11 points. Right, like, he's not a big overperformer. Michaels is not a weak challenger. And ultimately, I just don't see Evers holding on. I think he's going to lose by but 3, and I think Ron John's going to win, and I think Barnes will lose by but 4. So, Republicans will win the 2 big statewide races in Wisconsin. I think, for what it's worth, the attorney general race between Josh Kaul and whoever the Republicans are running, again, Democratic incumbent, so I only know his name, is going to probably go Republican by about a point. Down ballot race in Wisconsin are pretty hard to predict, but like, I think the only race the Democrats will be able to hold on to is a LaFollette's seat, because he's fairly well known in Wisconsin, but I think even that race is a toss up too. So just to point it out, I think Republicans are going to sweep all but one of the statewide offices in Wisconsin in 2022. So I mentioned at the beginning of the video there's a House seat that's worth talking about here, and I'll get into it right now, which again is that 3rd district. So the 3rd district was held by Ron Kind, or it currently is held by Ron Kind, a Democrat. Again, this is a working class seat. If you look at the 2018 results, or actually, we'll go to 2020 here because it's actually a better representation of where we're at. But in 2020, this was a seat that Ron Kind won by about 3.5% over, by just about 3% over Derek Van Orden. Again, this is a seat that Trump won by 4, so there was a bit of crossover there. A lot of Trump voters did vote for Ron Kind, but ultimately what we saw was that Kind was able to narrowly hold on in a very right-trending working class seat. But Kind has retired. The seat got redistricted to be about a point more Republican. And, Van Orden's, not a bad candidate. He had lost in 2020, but he actually did fairly well. He actually did 17% better than the Republican who ran in 2018 against Ron Kind, who lost by 20. And also, when you take a look at his opponent, Brad Pfaff, Pfaff's a decent candidate, but he's not nearly up to the level of Ron Kind, the incumbent Democrat. And so, primary turnout favored Republicans here. They won by 4,000 votes, which is very good for them in this district. And, you look at campaign finance cash on hand in this election here, if I can find it right at the bottom of this page. Brad Pfaff has like $200,000 on hand, even less. Van Orden has 1.7 million, so he's going to massively outspend Brad Pfaff as he blitzes him in the airwaves. And if you take a look at the race ratings, this is a Republican pickup, by the way. Again, the seat is held by the Democratic incumbent who's retiring. Everyone rates this lean Republican. I actually have this likely Republican. I think it goes red by high single digits, maybe even 10% if things get really bad for Democrats in Wisconsin. And ultimately, I just don't see a path for Democrats to hold the seat. It's a Trump plus 5 district. It's very right trending. I don't really think this is a scenario in which Brad Pfaff manages to hold the seat for the Democrats. Even if he did, he'd be dead on arrival by 2024. So not great there either. So I think to recap, to bring it full circle, Ron Johnson's going to win the Senate race. He's up by a point in the polls, and last time he was underestimated by 6%. He'll win by a fairly good amount. Governor's race, Tony Evers is going to go down here. Evers, again, incumbent Democratic governor, not popular enough to hold on. And, he's someone who I think is going to be having a difficult time appealing to the working class voter that got him over the line in 2018. And then in this 3rd district right here, again, this is a seat that's been held by the Democrats for a while. I think it flips red. I think it'll be a signature flip for Republicans. They're going to win back the seat. It's a majority working class seat. It's a very right-trending seat, a very conservative seat overall. I think it goes red for the first time in a while. So, Wisconsin, nationally, it might not be a red wave. We'll have to, that's still to be determined, I think. But in Wisconsin, I think Republicans have a very good year. So, thank you so much for watching this video. Please tell me what you think. Do you think Evers will hold on? Do you think Barnes will be able to knock off Johnson? Let me know what you think. I want to hear what you guys are thinking too, so we can see where my audience is at. But with that being said, thanks so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed already, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.